Little poor girl asks billionaire dad, "If I make your son smile, will you get me a snack?" He doubts it until the boy starts laughing. The house was too quiet. Clark stopped at the kitchen doorway and looked around. Everything in its place, everything clean, everything perfectly organized, and completely lifeless. 8 months ago, this same kitchen was a happy chaos. Sarah humming while making pancakes, Ames laughing loudly when the batter splattered on the stove, the dog barking for a small piece. Now, even the dog was gone. Clark couldn't take care of it anymore. Now there was only silence, a silence that hurt the ears and made his chest tighten, a silence that screamed about everything they had lost. Clark poured coffee into 2 cups, as he always did, as he always had since Sarah died. The second cup would sit there, untouched, until he threw it out before leaving for work. But something inside him insisted on preparing it. "Ames, come have breakfast," he called, walking up the stairs. The boy was awake, of course. He always was. Sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing his usual striped t-shirt, staring at his own hands. 5 years old, and he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his small shoulders. When Clark entered the room, Ames looked up for a second. Just a second. Then he looked back down. "Good morning, son." Nothing. As always, Clark felt that familiar pang in his chest. The same tightness he felt every morning, every afternoon, every night. The feeling of failing the only person who still mattered. They went down to the kitchen together. Ames sat in the 3rd chair, always the 3rd one. Clark put bread in the toaster and poured chocolate milk. The usual routine, the silent ritual that kept them both functioning, or pretending to function. Clark drank his coffee standing up, scrolling through his phone. 15 new emails, 3 meetings, an overdue report. Work never stopped, and he was grateful for it. It was the only thing that still made sense in his life. Ames ate slowly, chewing each piece of bread as if it were the most important thing in the world. Clark watched his son and tried to remember the last time he saw him smile. He couldn't. Before the accident, Ames was a normal kid. He talked non-stop, asked 1,000 questions, laughed at any silly thing. He wanted to play superhero, loved cartoons, and whined for ice cream for dinner. Now it was as if someone had erased all the colors from inside him. "Come on, I need to drop you off at school," Clark said, putting his phone away. Ames got up and went to get his backpack. Clark quickly washed the dishes, grabbed the car keys, and they both left. The drive to school was always silent, but before it was a different kind of silence. Sarah would sing along to the radio. Ames would make up stories about the cars passing by, and Clark would laugh at the nonsense they both talked about. Now the silence was heavy, oppressive. Clark sometimes turned on the radio, but the songs seemed too cheerful, too fake for that moment. So he would turn it off and keep driving, with Ames staring out the window as if the world outside was a movie he watched without interest. At school, Miss Henderson always came to greet Ames at the door. A kind woman with graying hair and a smile that seemed genuine. "Good morning, Ames. What a cool shirt you're wearing today." The boy would look at her for a moment, then walk into the classroom without saying a word. Miss Henderson would turn to Clark with that forced smile he knew so well. "He's making progress," she always said. Yesterday he participated in the drawing activity. He made a very beautiful tree. Clark nodded, knowing she was just being kind. Ames didn't draw beautiful trees. Ames barely picked up a pencil. The office became his refuge. There, Clark could focus. He solved problems, created solutions, helped companies find their way. It was ironic. He was saving other people's businesses but couldn't save his own family. "Jim wants to see you," said Jenny, his assistant, placing a stack of documents on his desk. Clark spent the morning immersed in spreadsheets and reports. Numbers made sense. Graphs had logic. Business problems had clear solutions. If only life was so simple. At 3 in the afternoon, the phone rang. "Mr. Miller, this is Ames's school." Clark's blood ran cold. "Did something happen?" "No, don't worry. Ames is physically fine. It's just, well, he's been in the nurse's office since recess. He doesn't want to go back to class. He's just sitting there, looking out the window. The nurse tried to talk to him, but I'm on my way." Clark hung up and rushed out. In the car, His mind raced. What if Ames was getting worse? What if something had happened at school? What if... When he arrived at the nurse's office, he found Ames sitting in a small chair, looking out the window. The boy didn't even turn when he entered. "What happened, son?" Silence. "Ames." The boy finally looked at him. For a moment, Clark saw something in his son's eyes. Sadness, longing, pain. Then Ames looked away again. "He's been like this since recess," Miss Henderson explained. "The other children were playing, but he just sat in a corner and stayed there. When we tried to bring him back, he didn't want to come." Clark nodded and held out his hand to Ames. "Let's go home." The boy stood up and followed him. At home, the afternoon dragged on as always. Ames sat on the living room sofa, staring at the turned-off TV. Clark tried to work on his laptop, but he couldn't concentrate. The silence of the house seemed to scream. At 6, he made pasta with tomato sauce, the only thing Ames would eat without resistance. The two sat at the oversized dining table and ate without talking. After dinner, Clark decided to try something different. "Want to play?" Ames looked at him, surprised. It had been a long time since Clark had asked that question. Clark went to the closet in his son's room and brought out a box of toys, cars, building blocks, coloring books that Sarah had bought. He spread them all out on the living room floor. "Remember these cars? You used to love playing with them." Ames looked at the toys for a long moment. Clark saw something flash in the boy's eyes, a memory perhaps. But then Ames shook his head and turned away. Clark felt his heart tighten. He put the toys back in the box, each little car a small defeat. At night, after giving Ames a bath and putting him to bed, Clark went down to the living room. The house returned to its usual silence, just the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator. He sat on the sofa and looked around. The room was spotless, no toys scattered around, no drawings taped to the fridge, no small shoes left lying about. It was as if a child didn't live there. Clark picked up his phone and opened the old photos. Sarah smiling in the kitchen. Baby Ames, asleep in his mother's arms. The three of them together last Christmas before the accident that changed everything. He quickly closed the phone. The memories hurt too much. How had it come to this? How could a house that once overflowed with laughter now feel like a mausoleum? How could a father and son live under the same roof and yet be so far apart? Clark knew Ames needed him, but he didn't know how to reach the boy. Every attempt to get closer was met with an invisible wall, and with each passing day, that wall seemed to get higher. Work was his only escape valve. There, he had control, he had purpose. There, things made sense, but deep down, he knew he was running away, and that each day of escape widened the distance between him and his son. Clark rested his head in his hands and took a deep breath. Outside, the city carried on with its normal life, families having dinner together, children laughing, parents telling bedtime stories. Inside his house, only silence reigned, a silence that screamed about everything they had lost, and about everything they could still lose if they didn't find a way back to each other. But Clark didn't know what that path was. Not yet. Clark looked out the living room window and saw the sun shining outside. Saturday morning, blue sky, a gentle breeze rustling the trees, the kind of day Sarah loved. "Let's go to the park," she would say. "Ames needs some fresh air." And they would go, the three of them. Sarah would bring a basket with sandwiches, Ames would run ahead flying a kite, and Clark would carry the blanket for the picnic. Simple days that seemed perfect. Now Clark avoided the park. He avoided any place that brought back memories that were too good. But today, something was different. Perhaps it was the growing desperation inside him, or maybe it was the conversation he had with Miss Henderson on Friday. "Mr. Miller," she had said, "Ames needs different stimuli. He spends too much time alone. Maybe outdoor activities." Clark looked at Ames, who was sitting on the sofa staring at the turned-off TV. The same position as always. The same empty gaze as always. Something had to change. "Ames," he called, "let's go out." The boy looked at him, surprised. They didn't go out on weekends, ever. "We're going to the park." Ames frowned, as if he didn't understand the words. Park. When was the last time he had heard that word? Let's go, Clark repeated, grabbing the keys. That will be good for both of us. Ames stood up slowly, as if walking through quicksand. Clark helped him put on his sneakers, and they both left. In the car, the silence was different. Not the usual heavy silence, but something more tense. Expectation, perhaps, or fear. Clark felt fear too. Fear of the memories the park would bring. Fear of Ames having a breakdown. Fear that nothing would change. But he drove anyway. Riverside Park was Sarah's favorite. Green lawns, a colorful playground, a small lake where ducks swam lazily. On weekends, entire families would spread out on the grass. Children would run among the trees. Couples would walk hand in hand. Clark parked and looked around. So many memories, so many. Let's go, he said, more to himself than to Ames. The two walked across the lawn. Ames walked beside his father, but his steps were reluctant. Clark looked for a bench in the shade, far from the other families. He didn't want anyone to see his son's sadness. They sat side by side. Clark tried to think of what to say, what to do. How did this work, taking a child to the park? It had been so long he had forgotten. Remember when we used to come here with Mum? He asked softly. Ames didn't answer, but Clark saw his shoulders tense up slightly. Maybe talking about Sarah wasn't a good idea. Maybe it was too soon. They sat in silence, watching the other children play. Say a boy of about 7 was chasing a ball. A little girl was laughing loudly on the swing, shouting, "Higher, Daddy, higher." Clark felt a pang of envy. Why could those families be happy and his couldn't? Then she appeared. At first, Clark only saw a colorful blur approaching. A little girl about Ames's age, running across the lawn with her arms spread wide like an airplane. She wore a pink t-shirt that had once been white, a denim skirt torn at the knee, and slip-on sneakers. Her blonde hair was messy, and there was a smudge of dirt on her face. But she was smiling. Smiling in a way Clark hadn't seen in months. Open, genuine, without reservation. The girl ran straight up to them and stopped in front of Ames, out of breath. "Hi," she said, putting her hands on her hips. "I'm Hallie. What's your name?" Clark tensed up. Ames didn't like it when strangers talked to him. He usually hid behind his father or simply ignored them. Ames just looked at the girl and then looked away. "Do you like to play?" Hallie tried, moving closer. "I know a bunch of fun games." Silence. "Do you want to see me do a somersault?" she asked excitedly. Ames continued to look down, not responding. Hallie tried a few more times. She asked about cartoons, toys, favorite foods, but Ames never answered. The girl sat on the grass, thoughtfully. Then she looked at Clark. "Why won't he talk to me?" Clark sighed. He doesn't talk much to anyone." "Oh," said Hallie, as if she understood perfectly. "Is he sad?" "Yes," Clark admitted. "Very sad." Hallie looked at Ames for a long moment, then turned to Clark with her eyes shining with determination. "If I make your son smile," she said, suddenly serious, "will you get me a snack?" The question caught Clark by surprise. Was she bargaining? A 5-year-old child was making a deal with him. "A snack," he repeated, skeptical. "Yeah," she nodded. "I'm hungry, and I bet I can make him smile. He just needs the right game." Clark almost laughed at her confidence. Months of failed attempts, therapists, medication, and this dirty little girl thought she could fix everything in a few minutes. "I doubt it," he said, shaking his head. "He hasn't smiled in a very long time." "Oh, but I'm very good at making people smile," Hallie said, standing up. "It's my superpower." Clark looked at Ames, who was watching the conversation with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Okay," Clark said, more to humor her than because he believed it. "If you can make him smile, I'll get you a snack." Hallie's eyes lit up. "Deal." She turned to Ames and lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Do you want to hear the funniest story in the world?" Ames looked at her, hesitant. "It's about a frog who wanted to be a ballerina," Hallie whispered. "But he wasn't just any frog." And then she began. She wasn't just telling a story. She was living it. She leaped across the grass imitating the clumsy frog, did pirouettes that ended in purposeful stumbles, and created hilarious voices for each character. "And then," she said, making a dramatic attempt at a grand jeté that made her fall on her bottom on the grass. The frog discovered that dancing badly was also a form of dancing. She stumbled again, trying to get up, making such an exaggerated look of surprise that even Clark almost smiled. And then it happened. Ames let out a small laugh. It was tiny, but Clark heard it clearly. Hallie heard it too, and her eyes lit up. She exaggerated the next parts of the story even more, making funny faces, imitating absurd sounds, and inventing a ballerina frog dance that was completely ridiculous. Ames's chuckle grew, first quiet, then a little louder, until it turned into a genuine belly laugh that came from deep within his chest. The sound hit Clark like a lightning bolt. He felt his eyes sting and had to blink several times. It was his son's laugh, the laugh he thought he would never hear again. Hallie finished the story with such an exaggerated bow that she fell backward, and Ames laughed even harder. "I did it," Hallie said, getting up radiantly. "I made him laugh." She turned to Ames and lowered her voice. "Do you like stories?" Ames hesitated, then nodded. Slightly, but he did. "Good, I know a very funny story. It's about a frog who wanted to be a ballerina." Clark settled onto the bench, skeptical. A story about a ballerina frog was going to make Ames smile. Unlikely. But Hallie began to tell it, and Clark realized she wasn't just telling a story. She was performing. She leaped across the grass imitating the frog, did clumsy pirouettes, and fell on purpose several times. She created different voices for each character: the snobby ballet teacher, the other mocking frogs, the little tadpole who became the protagonist's friend. And then, she said, doing a final pirouette, the frog discovered that he didn't need to be like the other dancers. He just needed to dance his own way. She finished the story with such an exaggerated bow that she tripped and fell onto the grass, laughing. And then it happened. Ames laughed. It wasn't a forced smile or a polite chuckle. It was a genuine, loud laugh that came from deep within his chest. The kind of laugh Clark hadn't heard in 8 long months. The sound hit Clark like a punch to the gut. He felt his eyes sting and had to blink several times to keep from crying. Hallie stood up, radiant. "I did it! I made him laugh!" She looked at Clark proudly, awaiting her prize. Clark was speechless. For months he had tried everything. Toys, books, movies, games. Nothing worked. And this dirty, smiling girl had accomplished in a few minutes what he couldn't in so long. "You did it," he murmured, still in shock. Ames was still laughing quietly, looking at Hallie with admiration. "So, the snack?" she asked hopefully. Clark stood up, dazed. Of course. What do you want?" "A sandwich," Hallie said, "and maybe an apple. I really like apples." "Let's go buy one," Clark said, extending his hand to Ames. For the first time in months, the boy took his father's hand without hesitation. The three of them walked to the park snack bar together. Hallie chattered non-stop, telling other stories, asking questions, filling the silence that always existed between Clark and Ames. "Do you guys come here often?" she asked. "No," Clark said. "We haven't been here in a long time." "That's a shame. This park is the best place in the world. It has ducks, squirrels, and sometimes a dog shows up who knows how to do tricks." Clark bought a turkey sandwich, an apple and a juice for Hallie. She thanked him as if he had given her a treasure. They sat on the grass for her to eat. Ames sat very close to Hallie, watching her every move with fascination. "Do you live nearby?" Clark asked. Hallie stopped chewing for a moment. Something passed through her eyes, a shadow, a moment of hesitation. "Sort of," she finally said, smiling again. "I like coming here. There are always nice people." Clark wanted to ask more, but Hallie had already started talking to Ames again, describing the different types of clouds in the sky. They stayed at the park for another 2 hours. Hallie played with Ames, taught him games she made up, and told more stories. And Ames participated. He really participated. He ran after her when she pretended to be a dragon. He tried to imitate the animal sounds she made, and he laughed several times. When it was finally time to go, Clark almost felt guilty. "We have to go," he said. "Oh." Hallie looked disappointed. "Okay, it was really fun playing with you." She turned to Ames. "Will you come back?" she asked. I come here almost every day. Ames looked at his father, then at her and nodded. Great. Hallie clapped her hands. I'll make up more stories to tell you. On the way back to the car, Ames spontaneously held Clark's hand, and when Clark looked down, he saw something he hadn't seen in so long. He had almost forgotten what it looked like. Ames was smiling. A small but real smile, like the sun appearing after the rain, just as Hallie had said. Clark squeezed his son's small hand and felt, for the first time in 8 months, a little bit of hope growing in his chest. Maybe all was not lost after all. Clark woke up on Sunday thinking about Ames's laugh. The sound still echoed in his head, like a song he couldn't stop playing. For 8 months, silence had been the house's constant companion. Now suddenly, he remembered what joy sounded like. He went downstairs to the kitchen expecting to find Ames in his usual spot, sitting on the sofa, staring into space. But the boy wasn't there. Clark found him at the living room window, standing looking outside. "Good morning, son." Ames turned around. His eyes were different, still sad, but there was something else, a spark that hadn't been there for a long time. "Dad," Ames said, and Clark almost fell out of his chair. Ames had spoken. He had called him Dad. "Yes? Can we—" Ames hesitated, as if the words were hard to find. "Can we go back to the park today?" Clark felt his heart race. Ames was asking for something. For the first time in months, he was expressing a desire. "Of course," and he said, trying to sound casual. "Of course we can." Breakfast was different. Ames ate faster than usual, as if in a hurry. Clark watched him discreetly, seeing signs of life he hadn't seen in so long. The boy drummed his fingers on the table, looked out the window every few minutes, and even smiled when Clark spilled coffee on his own shirt. "Are you excited to go to the park?" Clark asked. Ames nodded his head vigorously. "Because of Hallie." Another nod, shyer this time. Clark finished his coffee, and they both got ready. In the car, for the first time in months, Ames didn't just stare out the window. He asked how much longer, if Hallie would be there, if they could bring her something. "What kind of thing?" Clark asked. "I don't know," Ames said. "She said she was hungry yesterday." Clark felt something tighten in his chest. Hallie had said that, and from the way she devoured that sandwich, it wasn't just a casual remark. "Let's stop at a bakery," Clark decided. "We'll buy some pastries and cookies." Ames's eyes lit up. When they arrived at the park, Clark scanned the area with his eyes, looking for the girl with the messy hair. He didn't see her right away and felt a pang of anxiety. What if she didn't come? What if yesterday was just a fluke? But then Ames shouted, "Hallie!" Clark followed his son's gaze and saw her. She was under a large tree, building something with twigs and leaves. She was wearing the same dirty pink t-shirt as yesterday, the same torn denim skirt. Ames started running before Clark could even say anything. "Hallie," he shouted again. The girl looked up, and her face lit up as if she had just seen the best gift in the world. "You came back!" She jumped up, leaving her construction aside. "I knew you would come back." The two met in the middle of the lawn, and, to Clark's astonishment, they hugged. Ames hugged someone, spontaneously. Clark stood still for a moment, holding the bag of pastries, watching his son hug a girl he met yesterday as if she were his best friend for life. "Look what I was making," Hallie said, pulling Ames by the hand. "It's a fairy house." She showed him the structure she was building, intertwined twigs forming small walls, leaves as a roof, colorful pebbles as decoration. "The fairies need a place to live when they visit the park," she explained seriously. "This one is for a fairy named Starfish. She only appears when someone makes a very special wish." "What kind of wish?" Ames asked, completely engrossed. "Wishes about family," Hallie whispered. "So she helps people find their families or get closer to them." Clark approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt, but wanting to listen. "We brought pastries for you," Ames said, suddenly remembering. "Pastries?" Hallie's eyes widened. "Real ones?" Clark held out the bag. "Sweet rolls, cookies, and a bottle of juice." "Wow." Hallie took the bag as if it were a treasure. "Thank you so much. You are the kindest people I've ever met." She took out a sweet roll and took a huge bite, closing her eyes in pleasure. "This is delicious. Want to share?" she offered to Ames. The two sat on the grass and shared the snack, chatting excitedly about the fairy house. Clark sat on a nearby bench, pretending to read emails on his phone, but actually watching their every move. It was surreal. Ames was talking, laughing, asking questions, sharing ideas. "We can make a house for the fairy prince too," Ames suggested. "Good idea," Hallie agreed. "Yeah, let's build him a mansion, with towers and everything." The two stood up and began to collect more twigs. Clark watched Ames run back and forth, genuinely excited, genuinely engaged in something for the first time in so long. "This branch can be a tower," Ames shouted, finding a taller piece of wood. "Perfect," Hallie clapped. "You're really good at this." Clark felt a strange sensation in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't exactly happiness, it was still too early for that. But it was hope. As if a door that had been locked for a long time was finally starting to open. The hours passed without Clark noticing. He stayed there on the bench, alternating between answering emails and watching the two build a veritable fairy village. Ames talked so much that Clark could hardly believe it. He asked questions, told stories, laughed out loud. "What if we build a bridge?" Ames suggested. "Yes, a crystal bridge," Hallie agreed. "But let's use these shiny pebbles." Clark noticed that Hallie's clothes were dirtier than yesterday. The pink t-shirt had a new stain on the sleeve, and he could see that her sneakers had a hole in the side. Where were her parents? Why was a 5-year-old child alone in the park 2 mornings in a row? "Hallie," Clark called. "Do your parents know where you are?" The girl stopped playing for a moment. Something passed through her eyes, a quick shadow that Clark had seen yesterday. "Don't worry," she finally said. "I can take care of myself." "But you're 5 years old," Clark insisted gently. "Almost 6, Hallie corrected, smiling again. "And I'm very smart. Look how beautiful our fairy city is becoming." She changed the subject so quickly that Clark didn't have a chance to ask anything else, but he was worried. A 5-year-old child shouldn't be alone in a park, even if she was smart. "Dad, look," Ames called him. "We made a whole city." Clark approached and looked at the construction. It was truly impressive. Small houses made of twigs, bridges of pebbles, even a miniature lake made with a puddle of water. "It's amazing," he said sincerely. "You two work very well together." Ames smiled, a big, proud smile. Clark's heart ached. How long had it been since he'd seen his son proud of something? "Hallie had the idea for the city," Ames said. "And she's very creative." "She really is," Clark agreed, looking at the girl. Hallie was smiling, but Clark noticed she was shivering a little. The day was getting colder, and she was only wearing a thin t-shirt. "Are you cold?" he asked. "A little," Hallie admitted. "But it's okay." Clark took off his own jacket and offered it to her. "God, you don't have to," Hallie said quickly. "I don't want to get your jacket dirty." "It's no problem," Clark insisted. "It's just a jacket." Hallie hesitated, then accepted. The jacket was huge on her, the sleeves completely covering her hands. She looked like a little doll lost inside the adult clothing. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's really warm." They played for another hour. Clark continued to watch, and with each passing minute, he became more impressed. Hallie wasn't just a cheerful child. She had a natural ability to make Ames open up. She listened to everything he said with genuine attention, praised his ideas, and included him in every game. And Ames was flourishing with this attention. He spoke more in one morning than he had in entire months. He laughed without reservation. He ran, jumped, invented. Clark realized something that hurt deeply. Hallie was doing for Ames in a few hours what he, his own father, hadn't been able to do in 8 months. She was giving the boy his childhood back. "What time is it?" Hallie asked suddenly. Clark looked at his watch. 12:30. "Oh," she grimaced. "I have to go." "Go where?" Ames asked, visibly disappointed. "I have things to do," Hallie said vaguely. "But will you come back tomorrow?" Ames looked at Clark with pleading eyes. "Can we, please?" Clark hesitated. Tomorrow was Monday. Ames had school, he had work. But the expression on his son's face, "Maybe after school," he said, "if you want." "I want to," Ames said immediately. A lot. Great, Hallie smiled. I'll be here. I'm always here. She took off Clark's jacket and handed it back. Thanks for letting me wear it, and thank you for the pastries. They were the best I've ever eaten. Hallie, Clark said impulsively, do you want us to give you a ride home? Again, that shadow passed through her eyes. No, thank you. I like to walk. See you tomorrow. She gave Ames a kiss on the cheek, which he didn't pull away from to Clark's surprise, and ran off through the park. Clark and Ames stood there watching her go. She's nice, Ames said quietly. She is, Clark agreed. On the way home, Ames didn't stop talking about Hallie, about her games, the stories she made up, how funny and smart she was. Dad, Ames said, as they were almost home. Yes? Thank you for taking me to the park. Clark felt his eyes burn. His son was thanking him. He was communicating. Guys, thank you for asking me to go, he replied. That night, for the first time in months, Ames ate everything on his plate. He talked about school, asked if he could bring toys to the park tomorrow, and even told a joke Hallie had taught him. Why did the bird go to the doctor, he asked, barely able to contain his laughter. Why? Because he had a broken wing. Ames burst out laughing at his own joke. Clark laughed too, not because the joke was funny, but because seeing Ames laugh was the most beautiful thing in the world. Later, after putting Ames to bed, Clark sat in the living room and reflected on the day. Something fundamental had changed. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with expectation, with possibilities, but he was also worried about Hallie, a 5-year-old child, alone, in dirty clothes, clearly hungry. Where did she sleep? Who took care of her? And why was she saving his family when she clearly needed saving herself? Clark picked up the phone and almost called social services. But he stopped. What if they took Hallie away? What if Ames returned to his silence? It was selfish to think that way, he knew, but to see his son happy after so long, he decided to wait. Tomorrow he would ask more questions. Tomorrow he would better understand Hallie's situation. Tomorrow he would figure out how to help her in the same way she was helping them. Because one thing was clear, that small yet brave girl had done more for his family in 2 days than any therapist, any medication, any attempt he had made. She had given his son his laugh back, and Clark was determined to repay her somehow. Upstairs, for the first time in 8 months, Ames slept with a smile on his face, and Clark slept with hope in his heart. The first thing Clark noticed when he woke up was the sound of rain hitting the window. Thick, heavy rain, the kind that soaks everything in minutes. The second was the wind howling outside, making the trees sway violently. Clark looked at the thermometer on the kitchen wall. 46 degrees, fall had arrived for good, bringing with it the first truly cold day of the year. Dad, Ames appeared in the kitchen, already dressed with his backpack on. Will Hallie be at the park today? Clark looked out the window again. The rain showed no signs of letting up. With this weather, son, I think she'll stay home. But she said she's always there, Ames insisted, worried. What if she's waiting for us? Clark hesitated. For the past few days, they had created a routine. Pick up Ames from school and go straight to the park. Hallie was always there, as if she lived in that place, and always in the same clothes, the pink t-shirt that looked dirtier each day, the denim skirt with the rip at the knee, the worn-out sneakers. Let's just take a look, Clark relented. If she's not there, we'll go back home. Ames's face lit up. Thanks, Dad. After dropping Ames off at school, Clark spent the day at the office trying to focus on work, but his thoughts kept returning to Hallie, a 5-year-old child, alone on a day like this. Where would she be taking shelter? At 3 in the afternoon, when he went to pick up Ames, the rain had subsided to a cold drizzle, but the wind was still strong. Can we go to the park now? Ames asked as soon as he got in the car. Sure. The drive was silent, but Clark noticed that Ames was anxiously looking out the window, searching for signs that the weather was improving. When they arrived at the park, Clark scanned the area with his eyes. The playground equipment was wet and empty, the trees were constantly dripping, and a fine mist covered the lawn. The place looked deserted. She's not here, Clark said, relieved. She must have stayed home today. Let's go. There. Ames pointed. Yeah, that's her. Clark followed his son's gaze and felt his stomach clench. There was Hallie under a large tree, huddled against the trunk. Even from a distance, he could see she was shivering. Oh my God, Clark murmured. They both got out of the car and ran to her. As they got closer, Clark saw that the situation was worse than he had imagined. Hallie was soaked from head to toe. Her blonde hair was stuck to her face, her pink t-shirt was completely wet, and her sneakers squelched with water at every move. "Hallie!" Ames shouted. "Are you okay?" The girl lifted her head and tried to smile, but her lips were purple from the cold. "Hi, Ames," she said, her voice trembling. I knew you guys would come." Clark knelt in front of her, shocked by what he saw. Hallie was freezing, wet, visibly cold. Her feet were soaked inside her torn sneakers, and she was shivering so much she could barely speak properly. "Hallie, how long have you been here?" he asked, already taking off his own coat. "I don't know," she murmured. Since this morning, I think." "Since this morning." Clark wrapped her in the coat, which immediately became soaked too. "You've been in the rain the whole time?" Hallie shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "I hid under the tree. It wasn't so bad." Clark looked up. The tree offered some protection, but not enough for a downpour of that magnitude. Hallie had spent hours there, alone in the cold. "Where are you supposed to be?" he asked gently. "Where do you live?" Hallie looked away. I have places I stay." "What places?" "Safe places," she said evasively. "Don't worry about me, I can take care of myself." Clark felt an anger building inside him. Not anger at Hallie, but at whoever was responsible for leaving a 5-year-old child alone on a day like this. "You're coming with us today," he said, decisively. "It's not up for discussion." Hallie's eyes widened. "Come where?" "To our house. But first we're going to buy you some warm clothes." "I can't," Hallie said quickly. "I don't have money for clothes." "No one is asking for money," Clark said, standing up. "Let's go, you're freezing and you need to get warm." Hallie looked at Ames, uncertain. "It's true," the boy said. "Our dad is nice, and our house is really warm." "But I'll get everything dirty," Hallie protested. "So look at me." "Wet clothes dry, dirty houses can be cleaned," Clark said. "Let's go." He held out his hand to her. Hallie hesitated for a long moment, looking at the outstretched hand, as if she couldn't believe someone was offering help. Finally, she took Clark's hand. They went straight to a children's clothing store at the mall. Clark had never bought clothes for a girl after Sarah died. That task had been delegated to the babysitter who occasionally looked after Ames, but Hallie made it easy. "You can pick whatever you want," Clark said. Hallie's eyes shone as if she had never heard those words before. "Anything. Anything," Clark confirmed. "You need warm clothes." Hallie walked through the store with reverence, gently touching the hangers. She stopped in front of a light pink coat, as soft as a blanket. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Then it's yours," Clark said. "Try it on." Hallie put on the coat and looked at herself in the mirror. The smile that appeared on her face was one of pure joy. The coat was perfect, warm, soft, and her favorite color. "Now you need boots," Clark said, leading her to the shoe section. Hallie chose a pair of pink boots that matched the coat. When she put them on, she walked around the store just to feel what it was like to have shoes that didn't let water in. "And gloves," added Ames, who was loving helping with the choices. "Gloves too," Clark agreed. Hallie chose a pair of small gloves with star designs. When she put them on, she kept opening and closing her fingers, fascinated. "I look like a princess," she said, laughing. Clark also bought underwear, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, 2 sweaters, and a pair of pajamas with unicorn designs that made Hallie's eyes sparkle. "This is too much," Hallie protested when she saw all the bags. "I don't need this many clothes." "All children need clean, warm clothes," Clark said simply. "It's not too much. It's enough." In the car, on the way home, Hallie couldn't stop touching her new coat. "It's so soft," she said, amazed, "and so warm." "Do you like it?" Ames asked. "I love it," Hallie said. "I've never had such a beautiful coat." Clark's heart ached. Never had a coat. What kind of life was this child living? When they arrived home, Hallie stopped at the front door and stared. "Is this where you live?" "It is," Clark said. "Come in." Hallie entered slowly, as if treading on sacred ground. She looked around the living room with wide eyes, the big sofa, the TV, the curtains, the pictures on the wall. "It's so beautiful," she whispered, "and so clean." "Do you want to take a warm bath?" Clark offered. "To warm up." "Can I?" "Of course. Ames, show her the bathroom." While Hallie was taking a bath, Clark prepared hot chocolate and set out a fluffy towel. When she came out of the bathroom, wearing the new pajamas, her hair clean and shiny, she looked like a completely different child. "How do you feel?" Clark asked. "Warm," Hallie said, smiling. "Very warm." She sat on the sofa next to Ames, wrapped in the towel, sipping the hot chocolate in small sips, as if she wanted it to last forever. "Your house is like a palace," she said to Ames. "It's not that special," Ames said, but Clark could see he was proud. "It is to me," Hallie said. "It's the most beautiful house I've ever seen." Clark watched the two on the sofa and felt something different. The house no longer felt empty. It no longer felt like a place where two sad people lived without connecting. It felt like a family home. "I'm hungry," said Ames. "Me too," agreed Hallie. "Let's make dinner together," Clark suggested. In the kitchen, Hallie insisted on helping with everything. She set the table with an almost reverent care, as if each plate were made of crystal. She helped serve the pasta, offered napkins, and asked if she could put the drinks on the table. "So you don't have to do all that," Clark said. "You're our guest." "I like to help," Hallie said. "It makes me feel like part of the family." The sentence hit Clark like a punch. Hallie wanted to feel like part of a family. A 5-year-old child shouldn't have to wish for something so basic. During dinner, Hallie and Ames talked non-stop. She told stories she made up about animals. He talked about school, and they both laughed at silly jokes. Clark just watched, enchanted by the naturalness of their interaction. "Can I have more pasta?" Hallie asked timidly. "Of course," Clark said. "You can eat as much as you want." She served herself another plate and ate with appetite, clearly famished. Clark wondered when her last full meal had been. After dinner, the three of them sat in the living room. Clark put on a children's movie, and Hallie and Ames settled on the big sofa, sharing a bowl of cookies. Clark sat in the armchair, watching. The two laughed at the funny parts of the movie, commented on the characters, and shared the cookies carefully so there was always some left for the other. It was a simple scene. Two children watching TV, eating cookies. But for Clark, it was miraculous. It had been 8 months since that room had seen laughter. 8 months since that house had felt warm and welcoming. 8 months since Clark had felt like part of a real family. And now, with Hallie there, everything seemed different. The house was alive, full of voices, laughter, energy. "Dad," Ames called during a commercial, "can Hallie sleep over today?" Clark looked at Hallie, who was looking at him with hope in her eyes. "Of course," he said. "If she wants to." "I want to," Hallie said quickly. "A lot?" "Then it's settled," Clark said. "You can sleep in the guest room." "I get a room all to myself?" Hallie asked, incredulous. "You do," Clark said, smiling. "I'll show you after the movie." Hallie snuggled deeper into the sofa, smiling. Clark saw an expression on her face he hadn't seen before. Peace. Contentment. As if she had finally found a place where she belonged. When the movie was over, Clark showed Hallie the guest room. It was a simple room, with a twin bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the garden. "Is it mine?" Hallie asked, touching the bedspread gently. "For tonight, yeah," Clark said. "And for as long as you want to stay." Hallie sat on the bed and bounced a little, testing the mattress. "It's the softest bed in the world," she declared. Clark laughed. "Good night, Hallie. If you need anything, just call." "Good night," she said, "and thank you for everything." Clark closed the door and found Ames waiting in the hallway. "Dad?" "Yes, thanks for letting Hallie stay." "You're welcome, son. Can she stay over more often?" Clark looked at the closed door of the guest room, then at his son. "We'll see," he said. "We'll see." That night, for the first time in months, Clark went to bed feeling that his house was complete. Not silent and empty, but full of life, full of possibilities, full of family. Downstairs, Hallie lay on the soft bed, wrapped in her warm pajamas, looking out the window at the stars. She didn't say it out loud, But she thought, maybe this is my beginning. And for the first time in a long time, she slept without fear, without cold, without hunger. She slept feeling at home. Clark woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, the quiet voices of children talking downstairs. For a moment, he just lay there listening, unable to believe those laughs were coming from his house. He went down the stairs and found Ames and Hallie sitting at the kitchen table, sharing a bowl of cereal. Hallie was wearing the unicorn pajamas, her hair messy from a good night's sleep. Ames was also in his pajamas, but his eyes shone in a way Clark hadn't seen in months. "Good morning," Clark said. "Good morning, Dad." Ames turned, smiling. "Hallie woke up early just like me." "I always wake up early," Hallie explained. "But today was different. I woke up in a warm bed, in a beautiful house, and with a friend beside me." She smiled at Ames, who blushed with joy at the word friend. Clark made his coffee, watching the two chat excitedly about what they were going to do that day. It was incredible to see Ames so awake, so engaged in a conversation. "Hallie," Ames said suddenly, with a determined expression. "Want to play with me?" Clark almost dropped his coffee cup. Ames was asking to play for the first time in 8 months. "Of course," Hallie said, excited. "What do you want to play?" "Can I show you my toys?" Ames asked, a bit shy. "They've been put away for a long time." "I'd love to see them," Hallie said, jumping from her chair. Clark followed them discreetly to Ames's room. The room was exactly as Sarah had left it. Shelves full of books, a toy box in the corner, framed drawings on the wall. Ames stopped in front of the toy box and hesitated. Clark held his breath. That box had been closed since Sarah's funeral. "This is my toy box," Ames finally said, opening the lid. "Wow," Hallie exclaimed, looking inside. "You have so many cool things." Ames took out a red toy car that used to be his favorite. "This one is the fastest," he said, handing the car to Hallie. "It was my favorite." "It's beautiful," Hallie said, examining the car. "Can I play with it?" "Sure." Ames took more cars out of the box. "We can have a race." Clark leaned against the door, watching. It was surreal to see that room full of life again, to see Ames actually playing, making engine noises, laughing when the cars crashed into each other. The two sat on the floor and created an imaginary racetrack. Hallie made different voices for each car, inventing personalities and stories. Ames laughed non-stop, suggesting new obstacles for the race. "This blue car is very brave," Hallie said. "It's not afraid of anything." "Just like you," Ames said, smiling. "And this red one is really fast," Hallie continued. "Just like you when you run in the park." Ames beamed at the comparison. After an hour of playing with cars, Ames stood up and went to his desk. "Want to see something else?" he asked, opening the drawer. He took out a box of colored pencils that hadn't been opened in months. "I used to like drawing," he said, a bit shy. "I love drawing," Hallie said. "So do you want to try again?" Ames looked at the colored pencils for a long moment. "I think so," he finally said. "I'll get some paper." Clark went down to the living room silently, giving them space, but stayed where he could hear their voices. A few minutes later, he heard them coming down the stairs, carrying paper and pencils. "Can we draw on the living room table?" Ames asked. "Of course," Clark said, trying to sound casual. The two sat on the living room floor, spreading out the papers. Clark pretended to read a book in his armchair, but he was actually watching their every move. "What are you going to draw?" Hallie asked. "I don't know yet," Ames said, picking up a blue pencil. "It's been so long since I've drawn. How about starting with something simple?" Hallie suggested. "A house or a tree." "Good idea," Ames said, starting to trace lines on the paper. Hallie picked up a pink pencil and started her own drawing. The two drew in silence for a few minutes, concentrating. "Your drawing is looking nice," Hallie commented, looking at Ames's paper. "Yours too," Ames said. "You draw really well." "Thanks," Hallie said. "I've always drawn, since I was little." "I used to draw a lot too," Ames said quietly. "My mum always said I was an artist." Hallie stopped drawing and looked at him. She was right. "You are an artist." "But I stopped," Ames said, after she died." "Why?" Ames hesitated, his pencil frozen in the air. "Because everything became dull. Drawing reminded me of her." She always looked at my drawings and said they were beautiful. Without her, it didn't make sense anymore. I understand, Hallie said softly. It must have hurt a lot. It did, Ames admitted. It still hurts. They were silent for a moment. Then Hallie put her pencil aside and looked directly at Ames. Can I tell you a secret? Ames nodded. When my mum died, Hallie said quietly, I was very sad. Life lost its meaning. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to play, I didn't want to talk, I didn't even want to eat. Ames looked at her with surprise. That was exactly how he felt. And my dad, Hallie continued, he works a lot. He barely has time for me. Sometimes I feel like he's forgotten I exist. Clark, in his armchair, felt his heart tighten. Hallie was describing their exact situation. That's how I feel too, Ames whispered, like my dad has forgotten about me. But you know what I learned, Hallie said, taking Ames's hand. What? I lost my mom too, and my dad, but I never lost hope. Hope for what? That one day I would find someone good, someone who really wanted me, and that I would have a family again. Ames looked at her with admiration. How can you have hope when everything goes wrong? Because bad things don't last forever, Hallie said, just like storms. They come, make a lot of noise, get everything wet, but they always pass. And then the sun comes out again. What if the sun takes a long time to come back? Then we learn to dance in the rain, Hallie said, smiling, until the sun appears. You're very brave, Ames said. You are too, Hallie replied. You just forgot for a while. You think so? I'm sure of it. You told me about your mom. You started playing again. You're drawing again. That's very brave. Ames smiled, a small but genuine smile. You know what else? Hallie continued. I think your dad loves you very much. He just doesn't know how to show it. How do you know? From the way he looks at you and the way he took care of me yesterday. People who don't know how to love don't do that. Ames thought about her words. Do you think he misses me? Like I miss him? I think so, Hallie said. Sometimes adults get lost just like we do. They're just bigger, so they think they can't show they're lost. The two looked at each other for a moment, processing the conversation. Hallie? Yes. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend too. And then, spontaneously, the two hugged, a tight hug, from two children who found in each other exactly what they needed. Clark had to lean his hand against the wall to keep from falling. Seeing his son hugging someone, opening up, talking about his feelings, it was more than he had dreamed possible a week ago. Want to finish the drawing? Hallie asked, letting go of the hug. I do, Ames said. I'm going to draw something special. What are you going to draw? A family, Ames said. A happy family. Just like me, Hallie laughed. The two went back to drawing, now chatting excitedly about colors, shapes, and stories they could make up for their drawings. Clark watched the two on the living room floor, surrounded by papers and colored pencils, and felt something fundamental changing inside him. His son was coming back, not just back to playing or drawing, but back to being a child. Back to smiling, trusting, opening up, and he was coming back to him too. Clark could feel it. There was a bridge being built between them, and Hallie was the architect of that bridge. Done! Ames announced, holding up his drawing. It was a house with three figures in front, a tall man, a small child, and a girl with light hair. Everyone was smiling, and there was a big yellow sun in the sky. It's beautiful, Hallie said. Look at mine. She showed him her drawing, two children playing in a park with hearts floating around them. At the top of the paper, she had written in crooked letters, Friends Forever. They're both beautiful, Clark said, approaching. Ames looked up at his father, and for a moment their eyes truly met. Not the quick, evasive glance of the past few months, but a real look, full of possibility. Dad, Ames said quietly, do you like it when I draw? I love it when you draw, Clark said sincerely. I always have. Ames smiled, the most beautiful smile Clark had seen in 8 long months. And Clark knew that something had changed forever. His son was back, not completely yet, but he was on his way. And it was all thanks to an extraordinary little girl who knew that hope could survive any storm. A girl who had lost everything but never lost faith that things could get better. And who maybe, just maybe, had found her own family in that room full of drawings and laughter and rediscovered love. Clark stayed up all night. The words he heard Ames say to Hallie echoed in his head like a scratched record. "My dad works a lot. He barely has time for me." Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the scene again. His 5-year-old son, sitting on the living room floor, confessing to a girl he barely knew that he felt abandoned by his own father. The truth hurt more than anything Clark had ever felt. More than Sarah's death, more than seeing Ames submerged in sadness. Because this time the pain had a culprit, and that culprit was him. At 5 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He went down to the kitchen and made coffee, his hands trembling slightly as he stirred the sugar. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clark remembered the mornings when Sarah was alive. She would wake up early on weekends and make pancakes. The sweet smell filled the house, and Ames would run down in his pajamas, his hair standing on end, laughing before he even sat at the table. "Good morning, my prince," Sarah would say, giving the boy a kiss on the head, and Clark would join in. He would sit with them, eat slowly, listen to Ames talk about the dreams he'd had. They would talk about plans for the day, about places they could visit, about games they could invent. When did he stop doing that? When did mornings become just a rush to get out of the house? When did he forget that being a father was more than just making sure Ames was clean, fed mates, and at school on time? At 7 in the morning, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Hallie appeared in the kitchen, in her pajamas, with messy hair. "Good morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, Hallie. Did you sleep well?" "Very well," she smiled. "It's the comfiest bed I've ever slept in." Clark poured her some chocolate milk and made toast. Hallie ate in silence for a few minutes, then looked at him with those big, wise eyes. "Are you worried about something?" she asked. Clark hesitated. It was strange to talk about his problems with a 5-year-old, but Hallie was no ordinary child. "I'm thinking about a conversation I need to have with Ames," he admitted. "About what you talked about yesterday?" Clark looked at her, surprised. "You knew I was listening." "I knew," Hallie said simply. "Dads do that. They worry and listen to make sure their kids are okay." "And what do you think I should do?" Hallie took a sip of her chocolate milk, thoughtful. "I think you should talk to him, from the heart." "Say what?" "The truth," Hallie said. "Kids know when adults are lying. But when adults tell the truth, even if it's sad, we understand." Just then, Ames came down the stairs, also in his pajamas. "Good morning," he said, more cheerful than Clark had seen him in months. "Good morning, son." Ames sat next to Hallie, and the two began to talk about what they were going to do that day. Clark watched them, seeing the ease with which his son related to Hallie. How he laughed, how he told stories, how he made plans. This was how Ames should always be, free, happy, unafraid to express himself. After breakfast, Hallie went to take a bath. Clark saw the opportunity he had been waiting for, and "Ames," he said, "I just want to sit on the porch with me." The boy looked at him, a little surprised. It had been a long time since Clark had invited him to do anything. "Can I?" "Of course. Let's talk for a bit." The two went out to the porch. It was a beautiful morning, with a gentle breeze and the sun shining through the trees. Clark sat in one of the wicker chairs Sarah had bought years ago. Ames sat in the other, swinging his little legs. For a moment they were silent. Clark tried to find the right words, but there were no right words for what he needed to say. "Ames," he began finally, his voice a little shaky. "I heard you guys talking yesterday." Ames tensed up. "You heard?" "I did. And I need to ask you for something." "What?" Clark took a deep breath. His eyes were already welling up, and he hadn't even really started talking. "I'm sorry, son." Ames looked at him, confused. "Sorry for what?" "For everything," Clark said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've been distant, even when I was right here." The words came out with difficulty, each one weighing like a stone. "When your mom died, I felt a very great pain, a pain I didn't know how to handle, and I thought that working a lot would help me forget." Ames was quiet, listening. "But I forgot the most important thing," Clark continued, tears streaming down his face. "I forgot that you were in pain too. I forgot to look at your sadness." "Dad, let me finish, son," Clark said softly. I thought if I kept working, if I kept everything running, that would be enough. But it wasn't. You needed me, and I wasn't here. Not really. Clark wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You are the most important thing in my life, Ames. More important than any job, any meeting, anything, and I forgot to show you that. Ames's eyes were full of tears too. I thought you didn't like me anymore, he whispered. Oh, son, Clark felt his heart break. I love you more than anything in the world. I always have. I didn't know how to take care of you and my own sadness at the same time. You were sad just like me. I was very sad, but I thought adults couldn't show sadness to children. I thought I had to be strong all the time. But Hallie said that adults get lost just like kids, Ames said quietly. Hallie is very smart, Clark said, smiling through his tears. And she's right. I was lost. I still am a little. And now? Clark looked at his son, really looked. For the first time in months, he saw the brown eyes just like Sarah's, saw the freckles on his nose, saw the small scar on his chin from when Ames fell off his bike at 3. Now I want to try to be different, he said. I'm going to make more time for you. I'm going to work less. I'm going to pay more attention. Really? Really, Clark promised. It won't be perfect right away. I'll make mistakes sometimes because I'm still learning to be a single dad, but I'm going to try, every day. Ames was thoughtful for a moment. Dad? Yes, I want to try too. I want to talk to you more, like I talk to Hallie. You do. I do. It's just, sometimes it's hard to find the words. I understand, Clark said. It's hard for me too sometimes, but we can learn together, right? We can. The two looked at each other for a moment. Then, without a word, Ames got up from his chair and approached Clark. Slowly, as if testing if it was allowed, the boy rested his head on his father's shoulder. Clark felt the world stop. How long had it been since Ames approached him spontaneously? How long since there had been physical contact between them that wasn't just functional? Clark wrapped his arms around his son carefully, as if he were made of glass. Ames relaxed against his father's chest, and Clark felt the small body surrender to that hug. They said no more. They didn't need to. They stayed there, father and son, for the first time in 8 months truly together. Not just in the same space, but connected. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of possibilities. Clark closed his eyes and felt Ames's soft hair against his face. It smelled of baby shampoo and good dreams. It smelled of hope. Inside, they heard Hallie humming in the bath. A cheerful song she was making up, about families and houses and people who find each other when they need it most. Dad, Ames murmured, without lifting his head. Yes? Can Hallie stay with us more often? Clark thought of the extraordinary girl who had entered their lives like a whirlwind of joy and wisdom, the girl who had brought back his son's laughter and taught him how to be a father again. Let's talk about it, he said. But I think so. Good. Ames sighed, snuggling even deeper into the hug. And Clark knew that this was the moment, the turning point, the beginning of something new between them. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be difficult days, moments of silence, tears for Sarah. But now they would face it all together, as father and son, as a family. The gesture was small, a head on a shoulder, a shy hug. But it was full of forgiveness, of promises of rediscovered love. It was the new beginning they both needed. And for the first time in 8 months, Clark believed that everything was going to be okay. On Monday morning, after dropping Ames off at school, Clark didn't go straight to the office. Instead, he drove to the city's Department of Social Services. He had spent the weekend thinking, and his decision was made. Hallie couldn't keep living in uncertainty. She couldn't continue without a permanent home, without someone to officially care for her. And Clark couldn't pretend he didn't see what was right in front of him. That girl had saved his family. Now it was time to give back. The department's waiting room was cold and impersonal. Blue plastic chairs, faded posters on the walls, the smell of disinfectant in the air. Clark was nervous, but determined. Mr. Miller, a middle-aged woman called. I'm Margaret Santos, a social worker. Clark followed her to a small room filled with files and papers. Margaret sat behind a metal desk and opened a folder. "You mentioned on the phone that you're interested in adoption." "Yes," Clark said. "A 5-year-old girl. Her name is Hallie." Margaret typed something into her computer. "Hallie Morrison," she said, reading the screen. "She's been in our system for a year. Orphaned. Parents died in a car accident. She's been through several foster homes." "Several homes?" Clark asked, concerned. "Unfortunately, yes. Hallie is a lovely child, but she has a tendency to run away. She always goes back to Riverside Park. The families find it difficult to handle." Clark understood everything in that moment. Hallie wasn't running away from the families. She was going to the only place where she felt safe, and by a twist of fate, it was the same place he and Ames had gone to seek a new beginning. "Where is she now?" he asked. "In a temporary shelter home. But I can arrange a visit if you'd like to meet her officially." "I already know her," Clark said, "and she's already been to my house." "Several times?" Margaret raised her eyebrows. "That's irregular. How did that happen?" Clark told her the whole story. The first meeting at the park, how Hallie had made Ames laugh, how she had spent the night at their house when she was cold. "And the child adapted well to your home?" Margaret asked. "Very well. She and my son have become inseparable. And, to be honest, she saved my family." Margaret made several notes. "Mr. Miller, the adoption process is complex. We'll need references, home visits, psychological evaluations. It could take months." "I understand," Clark said. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And in the meantime, Hallie will have to return to the shelter." "No," Clark said firmly. "I want to apply to be a temporary guardian as well. Immediately." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. "Are you sure about this? It's a huge responsibility." "I'm absolutely sure." 2 hours later, Clark left the department with a stack of forms to fill out and a home visit scheduled for the following week, but also with the promise that Hallie could stay with them while the process was underway. At lunchtime, Clark called his office and told them he wouldn't be back that day. He had more important things to do. His first stop was a furniture store. Hallie deserved a real room, not just the guest room with impersonal furniture. Clark walked through the aisles, imagining what a 5-year-old girl would like. He stopped in front of a small, light wood bed with a house-shaped headboard. It was perfect. "Can I help you?" a saleswoman asked. "I'm putting together a room for my daughter," Clark said, and the word daughter came out naturally without hesitation. "How old is she?" 5 years old. "And she loves pink." He chose the bed, a matching dresser and a small armchair for reading. In the decor section, he found what he was looking for, a star-shaped lamp that projected small colored lights onto the ceiling. "She's going to love it," the saleswoman said. "When can it be delivered?" "This afternoon," Clark asked. "It's urgent." He paid an extra fee for express delivery and went to the next store. Sheets, pillows, curtains, a fluffy rug. Clark bought everything thinking of Hallie's smile. He chose a comforter with unicorn designs, star and moon-shaped pillows, and pink curtains with small embroidered flowers. At 3 in the afternoon, he was in the school parking lot waiting for Ames to come out. When the boy appeared, Clark was almost bursting with anticipation. "Dad?" Ames said, surprised. "Why are you here so early?" "We have a special project today," Clark said. "Start a project for Hallie. What kind of project?" "We're going to set up a real room for her." Ames's eyes lit up. "For real? Is she going to live with us?" "If she wants to," Clark said, "and if everything goes well with the paperwork." "She'll want to," Ames said with certainty. "I'm sure she'll want to." When they got home, the delivery truck was already waiting. Ames was ecstatic watching the men carry in the new bed, the dresser and the boxes with accessories. "Dad, this is amazing," he shouted, jumping down the hallway. Hallie arrived from the park an hour later and stopped at the door, confused by all the commotion. "What's going on?" she asked. "Surprise," Ames said, pulling her by the hand. "Come see." They took Hallie to what was once the guest room. Now it was transformed. The new bed was in the center, with the unicorn comforter perfectly made. The star-shaped pillows were arranged against the headboard. The star-shaped lamp was on the nightstand, projecting small colored dots of light on the walls. Is it for me?" Hallie asked, whispering. "If you want it," Clark said. We're setting it up for you to live here, officially. Hallie walked around the room, gently touching everything. She sat on the bed, testing its softness. She opened the empty dresser, imagining her clothes inside. She turned the lamp on and off several times, fascinated by the lights. "It's the most beautiful room in the world," she finally said. "But it's not finished yet," Ames said. We need to decorate it together." They spent the rest of the afternoon organizing the room. Hallie chose where she wanted everything. Ames helped arrange the pillows, and Clark hung the curtains and assembled the reading chair. "Here," Hallie said, pointing to a corner. "Can I put my drawings here?" "Of course," Clark said. "We'll buy a corkboard for you to hang all your drawings." "And here," she continued, pointing to an empty shelf, "can I put books?" "We'll go to the bookstore tomorrow," Clark promised. "You can choose as many books as you want." Hallie twirled in the middle of the room, her arms outstretched, laughing with joy. "It's like a dream," she said, "but a dream that came true." In the following days, the whole house began to change. Not just Hallie's room, but every corner. Clark bought new picture frames and put up photos of the three of them together. Hallie and Ames made drawings that were framed and hung around the house. The refrigerator filled up with colorful reminders, shopping lists written in a child's handwriting, and shiny stickers. The kitchen table was no longer a place where two people ate in silence. It was where three people talked, laughed, and planned their day. Clark bought an extra chair, pink at Hallie's request, which officially became her spot. In the living room, a toy basket appeared that Hallie and Ames shared. In the bathroom, a pink toothbrush and strawberry shampoo. In the laundry room, small clothes drying on the line next to Clark's shirts and Ames's pants. They were small details, but each one screamed the same thing. "You belong here, you are welcome. This is your home." The social worker came on Friday for the home visit. Margaret walked through the house, asked questions, and observed the interaction between Clark, Ames, and Hallie. "And do you like living here, Hallie?" she asked. "I love it," Hallie said without hesitation. "This is the best house in the world, and Clark and Ames are the best family in the world." Margaret noted everything, talked to Clark about his job and financial stability, and asked for references. But Clark could see in her eyes that the decision was already made. "The process will continue," she said before she left. "Tired, but I can tell you that everything looks very positive." On Saturday morning, Clark woke up with the certainty that it was time. Hallie had been living with them officially for a week, but nothing had been explicitly said about the future yet. After breakfast, Clark called Ames aside. "Son, would you like it if Hallie stayed with us forever?" "Forever and ever?" Ames asked, his eyes shining. "Forever and ever, as part of our family." "I want that," Ames said without hesitation. "More than anything. So, shall we ask her? Now, now." The two went out to the backyard, where Hallie was playing with a doll Clark had bought her. She was sitting under the large tree, having an imaginary tea party. "Hallie," Clark called, "can you come here for a moment?" She got up and ran to them, smiling. "Did something happen?" Clark looked at Ames, who nodded encouragingly. Then he knelt on the grass, getting to Hallie's eye level. "Hallie, I need to ask you something very important." "What is it?" she asked, curious. Ames came closer and stood beside his father, also nervous. Clark took a deep breath. In the last few weeks, his life had changed completely, the silent house filled with laughter. The distant son became a child again, and he himself had learned to be a father again. All because of this extraordinary girl who appeared in their lives like a miracle. "Would you like to be part of our family?" Clark asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Forever." Hallie was very still for a moment. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. "Forever and ever?" she asked, echoing Ames's words. "Forever and ever," Clark confirmed. "Jazz is our daughter, our real family." The smile that appeared on Hallie's face was like the sun rising after the longest night of the year. "It was all I ever dreamed of," she whispered. "It was exactly everything I dreamed of." Clark opened his arms, and Hallie threw herself into them. Ames joined the hug, and the three of them stayed there, kneeling on the backyard grass, wrapped in silence and true love. It was a simple moment, three people hugging under a tree on a Saturday morning, but it was also the most important moment of their lives, the moment they stopped being strangers united by pain and became a family united by love. "Now there are 3 of us," Hallie whispered. "Now there are 3 of us," Clark repeated, kissing her head. "Forever," Ames added. "Forever." Clark and Hallie agreed at the same time, and in the silence that followed, there was no sadness or emptiness. There was fullness. There was peace. There was the certainty that, after being lost for so long, the 3 of them had finally found their way home, the way to each other. 6 months later, Clark woke up to the sound that had become his favorite song. Laughter coming from the kitchen. No longer the oppressive silence that used to greet his mornings, but excited voices. Life happening downstairs. He went down the stairs and found Hallie standing on a chair, stirring eggs in a bowl. Ames was beside her, arranging pieces of bacon in a pan. They both wore aprons, hers pink with unicorns, his blue with superheroes. "Good morning, Dad," Ames shouted when he saw him. "Hallie is teaching me how to make scrambled eggs, and Ames is teaching me not to burn the bacon," Hallie laughed. "We're making a special breakfast." Clark kissed both of their heads, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "We do this together every Saturday," Hallie said seriously. "It's a family tradition." Clark smiled. It was true. In the last few months, Saturday mornings had become sacred. The 3 of them prepared breakfast together, a tradition Hallie suggested that became everyone's favorite part of the week. The kitchen seemed impossibly different from the same place where he and Ames used to eat in silence months ago. The walls were filled with framed drawings. The refrigerator was covered with colorful reminders, photos of special moments, and stickers that Hallie collected. In the corner of the counter, there was a row of small plants, Hallie's garden. Tiny green shoots sprouted from the pots where she had planted sunflower seeds on a rainy afternoon. "Oh, the plants are growing," Clark commented. "So just like our family," Hallie said proudly. "It started small and now it's big and strong." The table was no longer too big for 2 people. Now it seemed the perfect size for 3. Hallie's pink chair was in its usual spot, between Clark and Ames. The 3 sat down to eat. Clark watched his children, because now there were 2 children, officially, chatting excitedly about their plans for the day. "Can we go to the park later?" Hallie asked. "Of course," Clark said, "and we can bring a picnic." "Like Mom Sarah used to do?" Hallie asked. Clark's heart ached, but not with pain, with gratitude. Hallie spoke about Sarah naturally, including her in the family's memories. She had a small shrine in her room with a photo of Sarah, surrounded by flowers she picked herself. "She was my mom too," Hallie had said once, "even though I never met her, because she made you and Ames and now you're mine too." "Just like Mom Sarah used to do," Clark confirmed. "She would be very happy." "She knows," Hallie said with conviction. "I'm sure she knows." After breakfast, while Clark washed the dishes, the 2 went to get ready. Clark listened to the morning routine that had become music, Hallie humming in the bathroom, Ames singing in the shower, the 2 of them amicably discussing what to wear. Hallie's room had become exactly what Clark had imagined. The walls covered in drawings, the dresser full of her color-coordinated clothes, the shelf overflowing with books from their weekly visits to the bookstore. In the center of the small table she used as a desk, there was always a photo of the 3 of them that Margaret took on the day of the official adoption. In the photo they were at the courthouse, all 3 smiling. Hallie in a pink dress, Ames in a suit, Clark beaming. "We're ready," Hallie shouted, appearing hand in hand with Ames. "Perfect," Clark said, grabbing the picnic basket. "Let's go to our park." Riverside Park was still the same, but to Clark it seemed completely different. It was no longer a place of painful memories, but of new beginnings. "Look," Hallie said, pointing to the tree where she used to hide. "Someone put up a swing." Hallie ran over and got on the swing. "Push me, Ames." "Only if you promise not to jump off in the middle," Ames laughed. Clark spread out the blanket and watched the 2 play. Ames pushed Hallie on the swing. She screamed with joy, and they both laughed non-stop. To Clark, it was miraculous. 6 months ago, Ames barely spoke. Now he laughed out loud, ran, and played like any child should. And Clark was no longer a lost father pretending to have control. He was simply a present, involved, happy father. "Dad, come play with us," Hallie called. Clark ran to the swing. The three took turns, pushing each other, making up games, laughing at silly things. Clark couldn't remember the last time he played like that. Free, without worries. "Picnic time," he announced after an hour. They sat on the blanket and shared the sandwiches. Hallie told them about her school project. Ames talked about the new friend he made in his soccer class. Clark listened to everything, really listened, and participated in every conversation. "Dad," Hallie said suddenly, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. When I used to come here alone before I met you guys, I always made the same wish." "What wish?" "I would ask the stars to send me a family, a real family, that would want me forever." Clark felt his eyes burn. "And every night I would imagine what it would be like. A dad who made pancakes and a brother who would play with me." "And now?" Ames asked. "Now it's better than I imagined," Hallie said, "because you don't just make pancakes and play with me, you really love me." Clark pulled them both into a hug. "We love you very much, Hallie." "I know," she said, snuggling between them. "You can feel it. The whole house is full of love now." It was true. The house that once echoed with silence now overflowed with life, not just because there were more people, but because there was more love. Love that was growing, healing old wounds, and building new bridges. As the sun began to set, the three of them walked slowly back to the car. Hallie was in the middle, holding Clark's and Ames's hands, swinging her arms. "You know what's funny?" she said suddenly. "What?" Clark and Ames asked at the same time. "I always knew my family would find me." "What do you mean?" Clark asked. "I didn't know how it would happen, nor when, but I knew it would happen." "Why did it have to happen?" Ames asked. "Because," Hallie said, as if it were obvious, "you needed me as much as I needed you." Clark stopped walking for a moment. She was right. He and Ames were lost, not knowing how to reconnect, and Hallie hadn't just found them, she had healed them. "And now we're a real family," Hallie continued. "A family that chose each other." "It's the best family in the world," Ames said. "It really is," Clark agreed. When they got home, the evening routine unfolded as always. Baths for the kids, family dinner, a story before bed. Clark now read to both of them every night. "Dad," Hallie whispered that night. "Yes, my love? Thank you for letting me be part of the family." Clark kissed her forehead. "Thank you, Hallie, for saving us, for showing us how to be a family again." "We saved each other," she said, closing her eyes, "like the best families do." Clark turned off the light and left the room. 6 months ago, that room was empty. Now it was full of dreams, memories, love. He went down to the living room and sat on the sofa. The house was quiet, but not silent. It was the good kind of quiet, of a home where people who love each other rest in peace. Clark looked around and saw the signs of family everywhere. Small shoes by the entrance, drawings on the fridge, organized toys, smiling photos on the walls. It was no longer the house where a lost father and son pretended to be okay. It was a home, a place where three people who met by chance discovered they were exactly what each other needed. Clark thought of Sarah and knew she would be proud of the family they had become. Upstairs, Hallie slept in her pink room, surrounded by everything she had ever dreamed of having. Ames slept peacefully. No more nightmares, no more silence. And Clark, for the first time in a long time, slept knowing his family was complete. They had found their way home, the way to each other. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.